So I'm going to go straight into this, urbanization in India. And I'm only going to talk about Indian cities because this is where I've spent my last 15 years, and I'm perplexed with the fact that what's wrong with our cities and why are they like this? We are losing heritage. We know the issues of our city, unsustainable growth, energy, transport, water, everything that can go wrong with the city is going wrong. Rivers are drying up and they're becoming unlivable. Why? Should I just take that? Yeah. So just very quickly, okay, population growth. Migration is one of the things that our politicians always tell us is why they can't deal with our cities. We add about 10 to 15 million people a year, depending on what numbers you want to believe, which is like adding a Mumbai to India. And with a median age of 25, we know very well that that process of growth and migration will continue. Rural to urban migration, what I just spoke about, we've got, as we are to believe UNEP records, that we will have 300 to 400 million people move to cities in the next 20 years. That's like asking all Americans to get out of America and go to Canada in the next 20 years. It will be one of the world's largest migratory episodes that this world has ever seen. And it is going to happen, because it is happening. I mean, we know that Bangalore has doubled its population. We know Delhi has doubled its population in the last 15 to 20 years, and it's going to get worse. What's even more worse is the fact that with global warming, and I'm not going to go into that into too much depth. This is a picture from Bombay. Delhi wasn't very different 2 years back. The point is India is the most susceptible country when it comes to things like excessive rains, floods, heat, etc. The thing to also understand before we get into what is also wrong with the way we build is the simple thing. I mean, we know all the figures and facts about how buildings are useless, but the fact is that we consume, okay, like for example, where you're sitting right now, we consume about 15 tons of material to provide you shelter. 15,000 kgs is, per square meter is the weight of a building to provide you with protection against rain, sun, heat, etc., whatever. But have you managed this? This is what homogeneity brings, you know. This is what most buildings in India now look like on the suburbs, and they all are energy guzzlers simply because we've not been able to crack that problem. But we had cracked that problem. Sort of similar type of resource consumption in terms of at least material coming into the building, but we got thermal comfort, we got shelter, we got environmental control out of this. I want to talk about two things today, okay? The notion of sustainability, which now sounds like profanity because everyone talks about it, including Zaha Hadid, which I have no objections to, but except I can't understand how a chicken wing is sustainable in plan. And the more important thing, an architecture of almost somewhere. And, you know, I mean, we use this term now very broadly in our practice because we're not saying we want to be regionalists, but what we are saying is that there has to be something about a building, about a city, that has to have some root, something that tells it where it belongs to. I'm going to very quickly now go through about 4 different scales of thinking, and this is the whole point about design thinking, and how the design thinking that we apply to designing a product, to designing a small building, a large campus, or designing a city, or for that matter, thinking about the nation as a whole, is part of the same process. It's not to be broken down into segregated things. This is what designers do. This is what architects do. This is what urban planners do. This is what engineers do. No, I think that era of specialization is over. So anyways, this is a small institute that we built in Jaipur. It's probably quite a few of you know it. When we started this institute, which is located on the outskirts of Jaipur in an industrial area, in the infinite wisdom of our government, industrial areas in Rajasthan now allow you to put institutes inside of them. We went about thinking, how can we build this institute, because the price points were so low. We weren't doing sustainability here because we were trying to save the planet. We were doing sustainability here simply because there was no other way to build. That is the grain of architecture that has survived in India for a very long time. So we said, fine, 200 kilometers from Jaipur, we'll not take any material from outside of that. We said, we'll use thermal banking. What is thermal banking? Something that we discovered 5,000 years back, that the temperature of the earth 3 meters below the ground is equivalent to the average temperature of the place. In case of Jaipur, 25 degrees. We said we'll steal from all ideas that have been evolved over the last 1,000 years in Rajasthan, the step well, evaporative cooling, the jalis, all of that. And we said we'll put that thing together, we'll take the pavilion, stick it on top, elevate the building, use insulation techniques that have been used for several hundreds of years in Rajasthan, matkas, and put together this building. The building completed about 3 years back. We achieve a differential drop without air conditioning of about 18 degrees between summer and between 46 degrees outside. We get a drop to about 27 to 28 inside without using aircon. Nothing new, it's just old ideas repackaged. We finished this for people who know about cost. We finished this in about 1,500 rupees a square foot. We got thermal comfort, we got everything that we went out to achieve. But it also laid the basis of thinking that yes, an architecture of almost somewhere, yes, it may look contemporary, it may not, I don't know, I'm not talking about aesthetics right now, but it came from the region. Jumping across to a completely different climate in Calcutta. Large cultural center, series of hotels, etc. This was in a place called Swabhumi. If you're from Calcutta, you'll know what Swabhumi is. It's the only site, because it used to be a refuse dump, which is 15 meters high, and a virtually impossible site to work with, because even if you put a single structure on top, it would sink all the way down. It's in Salt Lake, there isn't any bearing capacity. It goes further down by another 45 meters, so we would need piling even to put up a hut on top of this hill. We said, what were we looking to do? In a warm, humid climate, under the shade, you're generally okay, but the humidity gets to you. So can we take the wind speeds, the average wind speeds of Calcutta, which are roughly in the 2 meters per second range, and can we use an architectural form to accelerate that wind so that people become comfortable, so we can bring activity back out into the open rather than confine it indoors. So we went about, we did a simple modeling. We said, let's plagiarize from the tree. We did these tree-like structures, small footprints, lesser cost because lesser piling, but larger spans. We sliced through these trees to create a structural system and came up with this as one of our early models of structural design. All the voids that you see inside of this will help X-ray through the Venturi effect, the winds to about 4 to 5 meters per second. We tested it in a wind tunnel and then came up with the sort of final form, and now the building's under construction. This is in Calcutta, and we're hoping to achieve the comfort conditions without really having to go to M&E. City, Delhi, where we are today. I live in Delhi, and I can't send my child to school without a car. I can't let him cross the road in front of my house. I can't access anything in the city without having to go through a boundary wall. The city of Delhi, the only democratic space of Delhi, are the roads and the boundary walls. That is the urbanism of Indian cities today. That is how our planners think. We are motor-centric. Delhi has 5 million cars. We add 500,000 cars every year to our streets. That's about 1,000 cars a day. Pollution, Delhi is amongst the most polluted cities. 70% of that pollution comes from cars alone. Pedestrians, we lose close to 1,000 pedestrians every year on the streets of Delhi. This is far more than SARS, far more than other of the modern epidemics that we had. We've lost 30 to 40 meters of a water table. Those are official figures. We know it's a lot more than that. Delhi had 916 lakes at the turn of the century, not the century, the previous one. We've got about 10 left, of which most are empty. Sewage, 70% of Delhi's sewage ends up in the Yamuna, which is why the Yamuna is a drain today, and hardly a river. What you see on the bottom left there is the satellite image, and God bless Google, because we weren't allowed to take these due to security reasons up till 6 or 7 years back. There's a sewage treatment plant. We've got about 15 of those in Delhi. Out of 16 aerators, 1 is working. We showed this to the CEO of Jal Board, and he said, call the engineer, let's suspend him. But he didn't say, let's fix it. Why can't we get all of them working? With the net effect that, according to our research and calculation, 90% of the sewage of Delhi ends up in the Yamuna. And how does it do that? It goes through the 17 major drains and the 1,000 sub-drains that were built by the Tughlaqs to irrigate and bring rainwater to Delhi. So here we are. This is a Google map of Delhi. What you see in the blue is the Nala network. It's 350 kilometers long. It's Delhi's best kept secret. Everyone knows that it smells. Everyone knows that there are mosquitoes breeding and all that. But what they don't know, it's contiguous. You can walk from Qutub Minar to Shri Ram College of Commerce without crossing a road. You can go from East Delhi to West Delhi without crossing a road. You can walk from Meridian Hotel. You can go to the CM's residence and then go to Jawaharlal Nehru Stadium without crossing a road. It's contiguous. It's still there. And God bless the fact that there's sewage in it, or we might have built roads and malls on top of it, but it exists. So we did some research that how can we get these things activated. We said simply by using organic plants. It's a very simple aerobic treatment system. You plant them along, you introduce fish, and you convert these into freshwater canals. You take what was just simply abandoned drainage and polluted streams and convert them and modulate their embankments, and you put pedestrian tracks and you put cycling tracks, and you now have mobility. You have mobility which connects you on the last mile. All our heritage, because this was built by the Tughlaqs, they brought it to the site for the laborers, they irrigated lands with it, all our heritage sits on it. We went through this whole process and we said, fine, even in our suburban developments, in the entire sort of east, west, south of Delhi, all these alleyways can easily link up to the nullahs. We can take a person from a house and take him anywhere we want in Delhi without crossing a road, through cycling or through walking. That network still exists. Okay. Thank you. Small film we made, it's only a minute, okay, where we traced out all these networks that exist. What you see in yellow is the metro network, and what we were trying to do was create a multimodal transport system between the metro, the BRT, the cycling, and the walking tracks of Delhi. We said we'll turn the city inside out. Let the roads be the backyards of Delhi, and let's look at a completely different way of seeing how can we engage with the city using its interstitial spaces. We'll zoom in into small portions of the city to show what this actually looks like. So the green and the blue that you see is actually the nullahs. You can see it connects schools, it connects government institutions, it connects memorials. It's all there. It's just that it's dirty. It just needs to be cleaned. And if we clean these nullahs, we clean the Yamuna. It's as simple as that. There is no complexity in that thinking. This is South Delhi. We put up the BRT network which runs in parallel to an already existing nullah. They're now, in fact, part of it is being covered by a concrete slab to provide for parking, which we are fighting against. And all we really had to do was take the pedestrians out of the BRT and put them on the nullah network, and we were fine. It connects to the stadium, schools, etc., whatever. North Delhi, the entire Delhi University sits on it, which connects back all the way down to central Delhi and out to east and west. How did we find this? Why didn't we know? Why didn't people know this from before? You know, this is the power of digital technology. It's the power of satellite mapping. And all our cities, because in India, other than Chandigarh, all our cities are organically evolved cities. They all have open drainage systems. And Patna, Ahmedabad, Bombay, Bangalore, all of them have it. This is East Delhi. It's the only lung left in that part, in that part of Delhi where people can actually come out and breathe fresh and open air. It's not a new idea. It's been done in China. Small canal fixed with 20,000 plants. Canal was restored. It's been done in Pune near the Osho Ashram. In fact, in South Korea, they pulled down a 6-lane highway and restored the stream. They found traffic conditions improved. They found the average temperature came down. They found people were far happier in general. We have spent 7,000 crores in trying to clean the Yamuna. This project cost 750. What we were told when we lobbied this with the government is that there's a zero missing, that's why they're not interested. But that was said to me privately and behind closed doors. There wasn't enough money to be made, and even if they did pass it, a lot of people would have to answer for the 7,000 crores already spent on the Yamuna. Anyways, when we went to the government, it took us about a year to find out who to go to. And this is the surface of Delhi's governance matrix. It's ridiculous. Water is with the central government. Sewage is with the state government. Road and land, transport, police, it's all divided up. There is no CEO of Delhi. Do not make that mistake to even think that someone is thinking about, or someone has the ability to think in an integrated fashion, because it is a cunning trick. And the cunning trick is that it's all been broken up. We went to the media. They did a lot of publications. We set up a website. We solicited. We got about close to 70,000 people who signed up. We got many NGOs to partner. We got letters of support from them, including the Delhi Urban Arts Commission. And finally, after about a year and a half of lobbying, we had the master plan amended by the Lieutenant Governor, who clearly said they should be restored. He also ordered 2 pilot projects to be done in Green Park and Mayur Vihar, and then Commonwealth Games hit. And since then, there's been total silence, but we continue to lobby, and we will continue to lobby against this whole network to see how can we put them all into the same room and all say yes collectively. They say yes individually, no one says no, but we can't get them into the same room. That is our vision for the next 10 years, to get these guys into the same room and say yes. So I'm just going to take 2 more minutes, and then I'm done. We were asked to go by the Ministry of Post. They said, we're redoing Gold Darkhana, which is a post office in central Delhi. And they said, we just could go and have a look at it. And we did. But in the general nature of design thinking, we couldn't stop thinking about the other post offices in India. And what we found was that post offices carry the character of the place. To date, whether it's Calcutta, Shimla, Saket, Chennai, everywhere. What we also found was that India is 155,000 post offices. It's the largest physical network on the planet. Okay? Each of these post offices provides last mile connectivity to the last Indian in the remotest corner. But what we also found is that 60 to 70% of them are not even electrified. So we did a simple study, and we said that on an average, each post office is about 500 square feet. So if we collected rainwater in all of them from the roof, we'd get enough water to feed to provide enough water for 130,000 people in a year. And if we put solar panels on top of them, on that little 500 square feet, we'd have enough electricity to generate for 3.6 million people in India in a year. Now, the cost of that exercise was 9,400 crores. Same year, which is about a year and a half back, the National Solar Mission by the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy came out, and they have pledged 85,000 crores for solar panels. We went to them and we said, look, instead of sticking them on buildings in urban areas, where at the best I can light a few lights or heat my water, why don't we do this? Why don't we just spread it out? What you will get is tremendous physical connectivity, and you'll get virtual connectivity. What that will, and obviously with the clean development mechanism, it's a natural payback, you'll get 140 crores a year. But what can we do with this? We now have a universal delivery mechanism for education, microfinance, bringing data on disaster management, right down to the grassroots. We can do anything that we want with this. The UID scheme, you can run it all off this whole network, because you now have the power to connect 1 billion people. We did some designs for prototypes. We called it the tree of knowledge. Collect rainwater, put solar panels, modify the little panchayats, make these information hubs across the entire country. So the Ministry of Energy and then Terry and all, they got very excited. The Prime Minister's office got excited. They sent a letter to the Ministry of IT. So we went and met them. They said, go meet the Secretary of Post. We went and met them. And they said, but this can only be sanctioned if we now form what is in India has become very famous, death by committee. So there are now 7 committees, including 3 levels of subcommittees and 2 technical committees to deal with this issue. Thank you. That's for all of us, is it?
Good evening. It's a real pleasure to be here and a great privilege. And for those of you that seem kind of confused, I'm not Indian. In fact, I'm Nigerian, and technically speaking. Yes, I heard that. Akon. I'm going to have to do an Akon performance tonight. Yes. So get prepared. Okay. So well, it's a real privilege to be here, and I'd like to thank the IDF organizers for a really great job. And talking about privilege, I think we're all privileged to be here, honestly speaking. And I have, in my practice, also been very privileged to work on quite a number of important projects in different parts of the world. I spent 9 years working with Omar, Rem Koolhaas's office, where I led several of these projects with high-end clients, high-end budgets, high-end delivery. And I think what regardless of the fact that these were very high-end projects, there was a very essential part of the ethics of working, which was that every client wants a bang for their buck. So it doesn't matter how important it is, the design needs to be thought out very carefully, which is why I was quite happy when Rajshri started the conference by saying design is not only elitist, because after several years of working at OMA, I decided to start my own practice, which is called NLE. And it's focused on developing cities and trying to achieve basically sort of maximum effects with minimum means. And it's important in the context of of civilization today. And as you know, cities are growing rapidly. The statistics are all there. And I was also quite pleased when the minister mentioned that India is catching up with the past. It's an interesting sentence, but I also think the past is an interesting, for me, a very important part of development that we need to focus on. So for me, the past is, I think India is not just catching up with the past. The past is, India has a huge history which it needs to look at to actually move forward. And part of that is that in my research, we've looked at cities and we're always inspired by the past. We're inspired by different cities, how they have developed all over the world. And part of my commitments in India since a year and a half now is studying Chandigarh and actually teaching a group of students from the University of Washington combined with students from Chandigarh College of Architecture. As you may know, Chandigarh was built in the 50s under the Prime Minister Nehru's instructions to basically build a city that looks into the future. And again, he was talking about Chandigarh as a city not being held back by the past. It's been 60 years, that was 60 years ago, and we're now looking at what the designers and the local architects, this is a team of architects that built Chandigarh. In between them is Pierre Jeanneret and a lot of local architects. So actually Chandigarh was designed mainly by local architects, in my view, Indian architects. Or they were built. It was a collaborative endeavor. And looking again at the past, a lot of that work was done. I mean, a lot of beautiful works were done in Chandigarh in the 50s, modernist architecture that I think are worth learning from. They were projects that were done based on using local materials, looking at the climate, looking at the economy of means. And our studio, called the Chandigarh Urban Lab, has been investigating how the city has been performing in since the last 50, 60 years. We're looking at it from the master plan point of view. We're looking at it we're looking at the main buildings, the capital complex, and how the complex can be improved. We're looking at furniture. This is a series of modernist furniture that were produced by the local architects and Pierre Jeanneret, and which became a very big thing. I mean, I don't know, some of you may have heard that some of the furniture items in Chandigarh are now being sold at auctions for ridiculous prices. I mean, these are furniture items that were basically made, you know, the architects designed, they did master plans in the morning, they did architecture in the afternoon, and they did furniture design in the evening. It was just part of daily life. And they are utilitarian items, and now they are being sold as high-end items. So part of what we were looking at is how actually these furniture items, which are inspired by local techniques and local crafts, how to reuse them, how to put them back in the public domain. And some of the ideas that the students have is, maybe you can hang put them up on the rickshaw, or hang them up on the swing and put them in public parks. The outcome of our research is a book called Globalization and Modernist City. It's being published at the moment. And an important part of what struck me in Chandigarh was the sort of where the economy of means that I learned in India. My time is up. Okay, all right. Well, this is very shocking, but I'll scroll very quickly. I'll show you. I have a 5-minute movie, which might be a little faster than me talking. All right.
Of all the world's buildings, over 90% have been built by non-architects. So there is clearly a vast local and practical knowledge in cities and regions across the globe. In the last 50 years of rapid globalization, the built environment has changed more radically than in all previous generations. And now, over 90% of these cities are being built by architects. Cities have become man's greatest, yet deadliest invention. This leads us to reconsider the role and responsibility of architects in today's world, the megacentury.
Architectural buildings are actually quite advanced in their production process right now. And because of high-end technologies, the architect has been able to actualize a lot of imaginations that they have. Architecture has almost exhausted form. You have buildings that have different shapes, buildings that turn around, buildings that twist, buildings that are made of materials that were formerly inconceivable.
Due to the forces of globalization, mankind has become a more aspiring being. Cities are places of opportunity, and so for the first time, more than half the world's population lives there. As this number continues to grow, the struggle for resources increases. In this struggle, some people have redefined our understanding of cities through their innovative and economical appropriation of public spaces, materials, and infrastructure. Challenges are evident in these developing megacities, such as the growing need for energy and more adequate transport. Take Lagos, for example, the smallest yet densest state of Nigeria and Africa's second most populous city. Lagos has a population of 16 million people, equal to an entire country such as the Netherlands, yet its area is less than a tenth of its size. Over 30% of the surface area of Lagos is water, and as a result of global environmental problems such as flooding, this area might expand.
In Lagos, you have a community called Makoko. The interesting thing about Makoko is that it's got over 100,000 people, and every single house is built on water. The homes that people build in Makoko are the cheapest dwellings.
Makoko is a community over 100 years old that thrives in the fishing and sawing industry. This region provides over a third of Lagos's fish supply and most of its timber.
Makoko has no roads, it's got no modern infrastructure, it's got no land. They have managed to create an environment and a living condition where it represents maximum urbanization with very minimum means.
In its essence, Makoko is a challenge, yet its inhabitants have found solutions to the problems of overpriced land, the housing shortage, and frequent flooding. It is one of the many global examples of local innovation.
Part of unlocking wealth out of poverty is in the ability to capitalize a city's assets. In my working practice on a wide range of projects in Europe, Asia, Africa and the Middle East, I've had a really great opportunity of experiencing cities and global ideas and local technologies that add sustainable economic, aesthetic values to architecture, urbanism, and everyday products. And we're basically now looking into those environments to identify these solutions and bring them back into the so-called developed regions where we believe that we can cultivate a new form of architecture and urbanism that is much more responsible.
Every global problem contains or suggests its own solutions. Inlay believes that these seemingly chaotic worlds hold some of the answers to problems faced by cities in this century of mega needs.
So it's not really about inventing new things, it's about discovering existing solutions and applying them responsibly globally. Our aim is to be inspired and learn from the environment where people have actually managed to be responsible and economical about the way they use resources and material in making these places home. I'll just quickly power through the next slides. I'll probably not even talk through it. Problem, climate change issues, we sort of analyzed it. Flooding is a problem throughout Africa, and like Manit said, most cities. The idea of the project was applied to the Makoko community where we're building a school. The concept is borrowing from local building technology and adding a global flotation technology to create this structure that we're now building. It's a floating school. It's sort of environmentally designed to be self-sustaining, it collects water, energy, etc., etc. We're looking at different flotation options from all over the world. And I think Lee had mentioned the more technology we have, the more primitive we become. I kind of like that a lot. I've always been imagining how, to design a building that suddenly becomes more very primitive, at the same time very, very futuristic. Thank you.
Good evening. I don't know if is this working. Hello. I'm conscious that rather than being surprised by the time, the clock telling me the time's up, we're going to be invaded, I think, by a wedding party. So I'll try to be as quick as I can. I've taken a little liberty of doctoring the title I was given, and just to address the balance a little. I'm an engineer. I'm a civil engineer, as one of your previous speakers was, and I've had the privilege of working on urban developments across the globe for about the last 20 years. I'd just like to give you a perspective from those years, and talk about a few challenges. I think, the importance of why we need to get this right, and some of the reasons that perhaps is blocking us moving in the right direction over the recent past. A number of people have referred to the drivers of economic and social change, the demographic shifts, the resource depletion, climate change. But I just leave you with the thought that there are other drivers now working in the world. The world is much more globalized. Cities are competing with cities, and brand and design, the business case, environmental awareness, all of these things are actually helping to shape the way we think of cities. Sure. And of course, cities themselves have a huge footprint. They account at the moment for 75% of the carbon footprint of the planet. And that's going to increase as people move into those cities. So we need to, it's the battleground really, where the future of the planet is likely to be won or lost. And equally, there have been a number of comments about the phenomenal growth of India. I won't dwell on it too long, but with a population rising very quickly, with movements into the city, your minister mentioned it yesterday, an extra 250 million people in cities over the next 20 years. That's a city the size of Pune needing to be built every year just to house that population. And with it, of course, is the demand for the infrastructure. $1 trillion worth of infrastructure estimated at needing to be invested over the next 5 years. And the reality is, of course, if that investment doesn't take place, so the competitiveness and the anticipated growth in the GDP of India is going to be stalled. So it is important to get these things right. And not just in terms of the infrastructure. There are issues about energy. Developing and emerging countries have a bigger energy footprint per capita than more developed cities in the world. On the other hand, the carbon footprint of a city like Delhi, and you can see it just on the graph here, encircled in green, is actually a lot lower than some of the more established cities, and that gives an opportunity for the future in terms of providing for a low carbon environment if the planning is correct. So how do we take the examples that we know are possible and start to think about how we can shape cities? I was very fortunate that my formative years were spent under the mentorship of Sir Ted Happold, who was slightly ahead of his time in Europe. He was talking about sustainable development in the 70s and 80s. He taught us that when we were engineering, we should be touching the earth lightly, in his phrase. It was his way of saying that we need to be able to do more with less. We are able to design buildings with zero net energy requirement, and very close to doing that with water resources as well. And there's studies that support the fact that as we look at bigger and bigger scales of opportunities, so you're able to, on that larger scale, actually use the scalability factor to remain at that sort of level of usage. So one can argue that we should be able, on the basis that we can design buildings of that in that degree of efficiency, we should be able to do the same for cities. And that's the sort of approach that we have to be striving for over the next 40 or 50 years. At Bureau Happel, we have an approach that we call mean, lean and green. It's a way of focusing our thoughts in making sure that we're applying our designs appropriately to start with the most obvious, the easiest solutions in terms of the efficiencies, before we start looking at more difficult aspects of perhaps providing renewable energy into spaces or introducing technology. Starting with the obvious, making sure that the planning is right in the first place. And of course, planning itself is one of the key aspects that really needs to be considered to ensure that designers, engineers, contractors, builders have the opportunity to develop cities in a sustainable way. And that calls for, I would say, a lot more foresight and leadership, people brave enough to stand up and say that the way we have been designing in the past isn't good enough, that we need to set new standards, aim for more efficiency in the way we do things. And in the design of cities, we need to use those examples from across the globe that people have been able to develop and calibrate, and bring those to bear on local solutions, as I'll show in a moment. And finally, the construction part of the industry is very overlooked, but it's actually, of all the industries in the world, it's the one industry that over the last 50 years has actually increased in terms of its unit cost of productivity. Virtually every other industry, we've seen a radical fall. And part of that is because of poor processes. These two images were taken 50 years apart. There's very little change in the way people have been building houses, either here, I'm sure, or in Europe or the States. So rethinking ways in which we can get better efficiencies in our construction industry, maybe through off-site construction, modularization. And then there's the barriers that are preventing us actually designing and building smarter cities. How do we incorporate technology when it actually is probably a premium in terms of its initial capital costs? There needs to be a lot longer term planning. Investors and developers need to be looking at a longer period of return on investment. So I just want to run through a few projects. I've been waved at here, so I'll try and be very quickly. This is a building we designed 10 years ago in New York. It was, at the time, awarded one of the highest accolades for sustainability for buildings, commercial buildings. It's still one of only a few that have that degree of sustainability embedded within it. But it shows that it was possible even then by designing very carefully and using what was available. We're currently working in Mumbai on the Worli Towers with Foster and Partners for our client Omcar. And we're hoping to make sure that we introduce the same philosophy, the same approach to ensure that they are as sustainable as possible. In Riyadh, in Saudi Arabia, we took on the challenge of looking at the water, the largest natural physical feature in that part of the world. It's the reason why Riyadh's there in the first place. A system that occupies a watershed of about 5,000 square kilometers, and by careful design and planning, environmental controls, biological as well as organic treatment, we have managed to reintroduce and rejuvenate that river valley, bringing back water and greenness into the city. It's now seen as a leisure and recreation area. It's increased values of properties, and it's also avoiding 250,000 cubic meters of potable water being used by the city each day. I've been working for the last 5 or 6 years on the London Olympic Park. Again, 250 hectares of very impoverished, polluted, post-industrial sites. It's now being transformed into what will become the greenest games ever, and the development platform for a number of sites for East London. And the stadium itself, this is London's main stadium in construction, the centerpiece for our games in 6 months' time. Compared with some of you remember the Beijing Games, compared with the main stadium in Beijing, same functionality, but uses 10% of the steel. And finally, in Europe, we're looking at one of a smart city play, working with a number of collaborators, high-tech companies, to develop a high-tech cluster and to demonstrate how uses of technology can actually add to the sustainability of city development. So thank you. I'll leave it there and finish my presentation. Thank you.